On this episode of the Scott Stedman podcast, we'll be talking about President Donald Trump, the concept of fasting, and the destruction of Christianity. So stay tuned and listen right here on the Scott Stedman podcast. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Scott Stedman podcast. My name is Scott, and thank you so much for listening. It is February 9th, 2017. The weather has been very funky here in Virginia. The last 3 days has been unseasonably warm. Actually, almost to the point where where yesterday, Thursday, we were up in the 70s. So I was very tempted to wear shorts, and actually I think I did. I wore shorts to go out and get the mail and then came back in. So, this Ohio boy being in Virginia, this warm weather is I love it, but at the same time, I also know living in Ohio that when it gets freakishly warm, then it's going to get freakishly cold really, really quickly. Um, so today I want to talk about a lot of things, and usually if for those of you who've been listening to me for a long time, you know that anytime when something big happens in the news, I usually am not one to jump right on it and start voicing my opinion or my thoughts on it. I usually try to wait, let the dust settle, and kind of see things from a different perspective or a different point of view. And I know a lot of things, especially within the realms of Christianity and religion, has been this immigration ban that Donald Trump signed as part of an executive order. And we've kind of seen a lot of different opinions on it from a Christianity. For those who follow Christianity, on one hand, we see people who are totally against this ban. I have seen, big time evangelical leaders from Bill Hybels to Tim Keller basically say that they are opposed of immigration. They are opposed of this ban. So we've kind of seen that aspect of everything. We've even seen just regular people, my friends, who basically say that this ban is not Christians. This is something that Christ would be against, this ban. And I think a lot of it is kind of geared, and they're using scriptures to kind of support their argument. And it's one of those things where I agree with all of that. I agree that I don't think that's something Christ does. And I think my own personal opinion, I'm not in favor of this immigration ban. However, there's also a part of me that kind of struggles with it too, because I also see kind of the reason why we have this immigration ban, the reason why, and mainly that reason has to do with safety. And I know a lot of people kind of say, well, we need more immigration reform, or making sure that people are coming into the country legally, or they're going through the proper procedures to get their green cards. Not only with immigration, but even just kind of the relationship between the United States and Mexico, and all those different type of aspects of Trump's agenda. But I know I also struggle too, because mainly the whole point is just protection, making sure that people are safe, that we want to make sure that people who are coming here on very honorable things, and anybody who is coming over here that may have some kind of ties to radical Islam or even ISIS, just want to make sure that, hey, we want to make sure these people are not coming over here and kind of destroying everything. So I kind of see like the other side of the coin on why people are in favor for this immigration ban, especially people who are Christians who are in favor of it. And I know one of the things that I've learned, I've been teaching the book of Isaiah as a Bible study for my church, and we've been going through the oracles against all these different tribes. And there's one particular tribe in Isaiah that really we've read that really kind of came out with the with this whole immigration thing, and it's actually Isaiah chapter 15. And this is an oracle concerning Moab. And if you remember Moab is kind of the a group of people that come from Lot and basically his the story. Basically, if you don't know the story, Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed, and Lot and his kids and his wife are running. His wife looks back, turns into a pillar of salt. So now it's just him and his daughters. And their daughters decided, hey, why don't we go sleep with our dad so we can kind of, I guess, preserve his seed or his legacy. So basically, there's this kind of weird father-daughter thing that happens, and that's how the tribe of Moab, comes into play. It's basically children that are based from Lot and his daughters, which is kind of gross if you think about it. But when we look at Isaiah, this oracle concerning Moab, there's this kind of this weird relationship, and especially we kind of see God, and especially this prophet, the prophet Isaiah, talking about Moab. And kind of the history is that, the Assyria is coming down, and they're basically destroying everything in their path. So Moab is fleeing, and Moab needs refuge, and they need refuge. They need refuge in a way for them to be able to come back to find refuge in Jerusalem. And there has been talk about, yes, we should accept these Moabites to come in and refuge, because there is kind of that relationship between Abraham's people and Lot's people. They're connected by blood. So yeah, we should have these people come. But then we kind of see them not taking the Moabites into Jerusalem, and mainly because of their pride. And looking at different commentaries from Warren Weiserby and some other people who've wrote commentaries on Isaiah, what they've kind of concluded is because of Moab's pride, their pride of them, they're going on and they're going to have pride and find security in their land and in their growth and in their vineyards. And because they had so much pride and they focused so much on who they are as a people and their wealth and their great pride as security, and not really finding their security in the Lord kind of sent them away. And you see that the Lord is saddened by this. Like, he doesn't want to send them away, but he has to, because, the Lord wants to make sure that all people are looking up to him and being obedient to him. And so when I see this thing about how we need to take refugees, there's also incidences in the Bible, especially when we look in the book of Isaiah or even the book of Chronicles and the book of Kings, where there's times where people want to take refuge, and after consulting with the religious leaders or the prophets, or the Lord will basically say, no, we're not going to keep you, we're not going to have you in our you're not going to take refuge here. And it's one of those bitter things where when we think about this, it upsets us a little bit, because God's like, I don't want these people to find security here in the city. They're going to have to go and fend for themselves, or they have to flee elsewhere into the caves or to the caverns, or flee down to Egypt, which during the Assyrian conquest, there was a lot of people who were fleeing south and going to Egypt to find security and safety from the Assyrians. So there's always a lot of difference in point of view. The other thing is, and this is something I always say to a lot of people when they ask me about political stuff or stuff that's happening in the news, and I tell them, well, if you see something in the news, you need to look at it from at least a different point of view or different sources. If you hear something on like a Fox News, look elsewhere, something that's not going to be kind of more on the right side of the spectrum. Look at something from the left side of the spectrum, and then even look at something that's international. And I know a lot of people like to go, oh, international, I can go to the BBC, and the BBC's pretty good, but sometimes you can find a lot of cool stuff just by looking at, like, even if you type in like Like, I know there was this story about Trump's relationship with Yemen, and I know someone on my Facebook page posted something like, "Oh, Trump's doing something horrible. He's going to cause war with the Middle East and all this stuff." But then I actually typed in Middle Eastern news outlets, and I happened to find and you'll find a list of a bunch of different newspapers over in the Middle East. So I happened to find one, and there's this story about Trump and Yemen and all that stuff, and it it was interesting because all this stuff is like, oh, Yemen's angry and they're gonna fight back and blah blah blah. But then you read a paper over in Yemen and they're just like, oh, the reports that you're hearing about is untrue. Now, now that could be a lot of things. They could say that just to make sure we don't want our people to be upset, or they're kind of being secretive about this very tricky issue. Or you could even look at, is the American papers kind of rallying people up to make sure that, just to kind of get people be anti-Trump. So you have to look at different point of view, and especially one thing that really kind of caught my eye, especially with this whole immigration ban, has been actually talking to a former Muslim. There's a guy here who used to be a Muslim. He was actually from Egypt, and basically his whole story is that he became a Christian and was persecuted for his faith. And especially, he noticed his son was really getting beaten up by a lot of by Muslims, were like beating up his son. So he decided he was going to take his son. Him and his wife actually took their son, left, went over to America, and tried to get his son to get a green card so that their son could be adopted by an American family, so that he could be safe from all the stuff that was happening in Egypt. Well, then when he tried to go back home to Egypt, he was on a blackball list and basically was not allowed to enter into the country anymore. And there have been times where he's tried to come back to the Middle East, and every time he's been not allowed to come back because he's been flagged for whatever reasons. And he talks a little bit about his relationship with Muslims, and, you know, someone who has practiced Islam for many, many years, and he just became a Christian within like his 30s is when he finally accepted Christ. And one of the things he said, because we have these meetings, and I'll meet with him and I'll talk with him with other ministers. And one of the things he was saying, especially during this election, is he was saying that, you know, we have to be very careful and really pray for our country, because the stuff that he saw in Egypt, he sees the same pattern happening here in America. And one of the things he saw was that in Egypt, which was at one point a Christian nation, they had a financial issue. And then with the financial issue, there was political upheaval. And then when we saw this political upheaval, we've started to see kind of this upheaval within the churches, within the religion. And it was just at that point where the Islam religion and its leaders were able to kind of move their way in and basically kind of establish Egypt as a Islamic nation. And he said, you know, those are the same things I've seen here, from the 2008 recession to kind of the turmoil we have in our political arenas, which obviously, if you've lived under a rock for the last 10 years, you've kind of been seeing kind of a lot of political unrest, especially now. And now it's kind of, and then now we're kind of seeing this division within churches, and even like something like small as immigration, where we see people who are saying, well, that's not what Christ would do, and people are saying, well, that's what we need for security, and I think that's what, you know, God would want. Or even with me reading Isaiah 15 and kind of saying, hey, there's some scriptural references where there have been refugees that have been turned away. There's kind of this turmoil between within Christianity. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting what this guy said, he said, you know, he said he doesn't like Hillary Clinton, mainly because there are some lobbyists and some groups who are part of the Islamic faith that kind of fund and kind of want to try to pave the way so that, you know, Islam can kind of be a very prominent part within American society. And he said, you know, the thing about Trump is, he said, well, I don't believe Trump's a Christian, but Trump's very smart, and he sees these things and he knows these things are happening. So that's why in his mind, he think that Trump would be a great leader because he would kind of basically unroot all the seeds that the Obama administration had planted. And I don't know if that's 100% true because, again, I'm not hanging out in Washington. I don't know the ins and outs in Washington. I'm kind of just a normal informer who reads the news and kind of sees what's presented in front of me. I don't know what's happening in the background. But, there's a different point of view, someone from a different culture who's from a different country, who kind of sees certain things, who has a different worldview and a different opinion than my own. And anytime when someone has a different opinion, we're always so close to pull out our boxing gloves and fight instead of go, maybe there's some weight to this. Maybe it might be 100% true, maybe be 50% true, maybe be 25% true, but there at least is something there that possibly could happen. And one of the things that I see is really this call for change. And I think even in our political arena, people have been supportive of a Trump presidency because he's someone who's very brash, someone who's very bold, someone who's just basically going to sign executive orders till he turns blue in the face. And I know people go, well, that's unconstitutional. He shouldn't do that. But at the same time, other presidents have done it too. And, well, no one's done it as much as Trump. Well, maybe. And the only reason why I say maybe is because I was watching I think it was on PBS, there's this documentary about the presidents. And there was Theodore Roosevelt. And they were talking about how Theodore Roosevelt was just getting kind of upset with just the political situation in his day with his cabinet. So basically, Teddy Roosevelt basically wrote like a crap load of executive orders and basically just kind of bypassed everyone and just wrote all these executive orders. And I think, especially with Trump within like almost the first week of office writing so many executive orders, it got people's upset. And I'm right, because you hope that the process will work, the government process work. But what I have been seeing is that there's so much political unrest on both sides of the spectrum that I don't even know if I trust that the political system even works anymore, because it's just so biased. And I think if there's people who are doing what they're supposed to do, then great. But there's some people who are not doing what they're supposed to do. They're either getting paid by lobbyists or paid by other people to make certain decisions. And it's not necessarily, they're not necessarily representing the people anymore. We also have to remember in Teddy Roosevelt's day, not everyone was a career politician. You can even look back at the founding of the country. George Washington was an army person. Thomas Jefferson was a very well-read, smart individual, but I wouldn't know if I would classify him as politician, or at least a career politician, as we kind of see of that right now. So really, there's in this talk about change, and one of the things I've seen is people want to protest, and people say we should pray for change, or we should protest, or make our voices heard. And I think all those things are great, and that's something that if people have the right to do that, they should. Especially, living in America, we have the freedom. So if you don't like something, you can protest about it. You can set a petition, you could do whatever to try to, you could call your senator, do whatever to try to initiate change within a certain decision or change in your community. But one of the things I see in Scripture a lot of times is really when people want change within for a certain situation or anything else that for that matter, there's usually something called fasting that has to take place. And I know on March 1st is the very first day of Lent, and usually a lot of Catholics will participate in Lent, and usually it's more of just not eating meat or anything. But the whole concept of fasting is really just amazing, because when we fast, and mostly throughout the scriptures, we always see food as a way of fasting. And one of the reasons why I think food has always been so prevalent to fasting is because food is something you need to survive. Food is something you need to get nutrients in your body, to make sure you function properly. So when you fast food, you're basically depriving yourself of nutrients. So that food that's kind of giving you those nutrients and those things to survive, you no longer have. So anytime when you're hungry or you have stomach pains, you then go to prayer to the Lord, and you allow God to kind of be that supplication, those supplements for you to be able to survive in this world. You put your reliance onto Him. And especially for those of us who fast, or if we take a moment to fast once a month, or fast once a week, we really begin to see change. Our prayers become more powerful. We really begin to see, or at least in my experience, I really begin to see, God really doing something. And if it's not really necessarily changing something, at least He might be giving me insight or wisdom to a situation that at once I have been blinded by. So when it comes to change, maybe instead of just protesting or complaining on Facebook, maybe it'd be better if we all took a moment to just take a day of fasting and prayer and really kind of seek God and go, God, give me wisdom. How should I respond? And maybe He will direct you to scriptures. Maybe He will give you an audible voice. Maybe something will happen that you'll kind of see like, oh, this is God trying to communicate to me about this situation. So especially change. And one of the things I pray about and I fast about, and actually we had a prayer meeting this week, and one of the things we talked about was unity in the church. And I think more and more that's definitely what we need. We need more unity. And I'm not talking about individual congregations, but Christianity as a whole. The thing that I'm kind of seeing now is not the Christianity I'm seeing now is not the Christianity I read about in Scripture. It's not the Christianity that I believe Paul and the rest of the apostles, if they were to come back and see what Christianity was here in America, they definitely would not see it as the same as they viewed it. And I think a lot of it is because we have gotten shift to a civil religion. There's a friend of mine who on Facebook, and she kind of posted, hold on real quick. Sorry, my throat was getting dry. She posted on Facebook, and she kind of asked the question, I don't understand why having a separation of church and state is a good thing. We should basically, the whole point is why does church and state have to be separate? Why can't it all be together? And there's a part of me that goes, well, apparently you don't know your church history, because if you recognize church history, especially in the days when Constantine established Constantinople as the official head of Christianity, there has been this idea that whoever is basically the faith of the ruler is the faith of the nation. And that has kind of been the rule throughout history, except when we begin to get to King Henry VIII, where we kind of see King Henry VIII kind of have this a religious flux. He wanted to get divorced, and we know about King Henry VIII's wives and everything, but basically it was kind of like his religion was what it needed to be. Well, then after King Henry died, and then I think it was his son Edward, who was very sick, and he was king for like 2 years. Well, then Mary Tudor came in. Now Mary Tudor is Catholic, where King Henry and Edward were Protestant. So when King Mary came into power, then the whole nation was now Catholic instead of Protestant. And if you were a Protestant, then you need to convert to Catholicism, or you were going to be severely persecuted. And then you kind of saw this on the flip side. If the king or the queen was a Protestant, then everyone must follow suit, and if not, you would be heavily persecuted. So one of the reasons why the Puritans came over to this country was because they were tired of all the persecution over there, and they wanted to establish America as this city on a hill to kind of be an example, to kind of be this example. So when the founding fathers start writing the Declaration of Independence and start getting our Constitution together, they wanted a separation of church and state because they saw how destructive it could be. And I think the reason why we have separation of church and state, and I know a lot of people want to kind of have church and state kind of basically go to bed together, but that could be a very bad thing. There's bad things that can happen from that. So keeping them separate means that people can worship however they want. People who are Catholic can worship without persecution. Protestants can worship without persecutions. People who practice Islam can worship without persecution. People who practice Buddhism can worship without persecution. People who are Jewish can worship the way they want without persecution, and it's a good thing. But what's kind of getting nasty is we're kind of seeing how religion and politics are kind of having this weird relationship. And I know Trump, with the Liberty University endorsement of Donald Trump, and Franklin Graham kind of endorsing Donald Trump, and kind of the Republican or the GOP, you're kind of getting this idea that if you're a Christian, then you are Republican, or you side with the GOP. So then when you have these other Christians who don't necessarily side with that same viewpoint, what we see is a confusion. People who are looking at Christianity and they view Christianity through the lens of politics, they kind of see two conflicting views of Christianity. Even when it comes to just practicing policies, there's some churches who are okay with who are okay and believe that it's okay to be a homosexual, and you can be a homosexual priest, or you can be a homosexual teacher for Sunday school. And there's other churches who say absolutely not, because the Bible says no. And you're seeing two different views of religion, and none of these two views, both the left view and the right view of Christianity, reflects anything close to a biblical Christianity worldview. And it's kind of disturbing to me, because I think with that separation, it's really going to lead to people not wanting to be part of the Christian religion. I believe it taints the Christian religion, and eventually it gets to the point where no one really cares about the Christian religion anymore. And especially as Christians, if we believe that Jesus Christ died on the cross for sins of humanity, and through a relationship with him that we can have eternal life, and that's the only way into heaven, then that's a pretty big deal if people don't want to join the Christian religion or be a Christian, because they're getting two opposite views of what Christianity is. So I don't like this civil religion that's been kind of playing out, at least throughout the political season in 2016, and especially what's happening at the beginning of 2017. So at the end, where do we go from here? And I'm going to say something pretty crazy. So if I haven't said anything crazy enough throughout this podcast, I'm going to say something pretty crazy right now. I think Donald Trump is going to be a good president. And here's why. And I'm going to show you why from a variety of perspectives. I think because of his brashness and his boldness, and I think he's going to be able to try to allow change to happen a lot more quickly than going through the process. And I think, in a way, I think there's going to be two roads that's going to happen. Either he's going to bring to light just how corrupt politicians are and how they're not really for the people, which is really going to make us as common people really angry. Or we're going to see him, because he's so brash and bold, we're really going to start to see a unity within the House and a unity within the Senate, to really work together to try to accomplish things and at least set things up so that we may not have another crazy election like we did in 2016. I think another reason why Trump is going to be a good president is because it's going to invoke people to actually participate and be a part of the political process. There was another pastor I talked to who's actually originally from Kenya, and basically his family had to leave Kenya because his dad and him were very well educated men, and especially in Kenya, at least during this time when he was little, if you were well educated, you were a threat. Because then that means, the militant government or militant groups that were in there wanted you dead because they still want to continue to have control over the citizens, and they don't have time for well educated people to basically say, hey, open up your eyes and see that there's corruption here. But when Ebenezer, when he came and he was taking his citizenship test and he had to learn about America, he was so excited, and he said, America is such a beautiful country. And I know for us who've lived in this country for long and have seen the horrors and especially this political process, we kind of go like, oh, this country's messed up. But for him, he said, no, this country's beautiful because change always works from the bottom up, not from the top down. So he says, if you want change within your community or change within your nation, you need to start getting involved in like a school board position or city council or mayor or governor or anything else. Don't think that, oh, hey, I'm going to try to run and be president to make a lot of change, because you can do a lot of change right now in your community and within your state by just doing lower levels of things. And especially what I have seen from people who don't think Trump would be a good president is people are actually standing up. People are saying, I'm going to voice my opinion. I'm going to call my senator. I'm going to write a letter. I'm thinking about, running for mayor of my town. And I'm thinking about, being involved in the school board and when there's school board elections, thinking about running for school board. And I think that's great. And I think what this has done, at least this whole election, it has got people saying, hey, if I want to make a change, I'm going to do something about it. So I'm going to run for office. I'm going to be part of the political process. I'm not just going to be a uninformed viewer who anytime when it comes to election season, then I start kind of paying attention and looking at results, but really paying attention to the news, really paying attention to what's happening within their local government, within their state government, and even with their national government, and just kind of seeing how all this is playing out. I think there's a lot of people who are just tired of being, basically people are tired of being sheep. They're tired of saying like, oh, well, I usually vote Republican, so I'm going to vote Republican, or I usually vote Democrat, so I vote Democrat. People are now saying, hold on, this election has really opened up my eyes. I really want to make sure I'm an informed voter so that I can make a proper decision without, basically without just voting blindly and doing all those things. So, I know that kind of sounds dumb why I think Trump would be good, but I think throughout this presidency and everything that had happened, I think it had really opened up people's eyes to the political process and really got people to say, okay, I'm going to do something. I have a voice, and especially if our government works the way it's supposed to work, then our voice matters. So if we like what the president's doing, then we can say, hey, we like what he's doing. If you don't like what the president's doing or what your senator's doing, you can say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. You need to change. And if not, then I'm going to be voting for someone else in 2 years when your term is up. And I think that's kind of why I think this Trump presidency is good, because it's really gotten people to open up their eyes and really say, hey, I now want to be part of the solution instead of just being an informed follower of the masses. All right, so that was a lot of me talking and gibberish for this time, but thank you so much for listening. I would like to hear your thoughts. If you love me, great. If you hate me, great too. I'd love to hear your thoughts and your opinions. But again, please like us on Facebook, the Scott Stedman Podcast. Just do a search, click the like button. You can also message there. I usually try to conversate through there. Also through our website, thescottstedman.com. You can check us out there. Email me anything. That would be great. So hopefully you guys are having a great week so far. I know Valentine's Day is next week. If you're married or have a girlfriend, hopefully you guys do something very special and romantic. And if you don't, well, then you'll probably lose your girlfriend, or your wife will be very angry at you, or your spouse too. Anyway, I'm getting tired, so I'm going to stop talking now. All right, thank you so much for listening. Bye.